Vietnam Airlines is the flag carrier of Vietnam. Founded in 1956 under the name Vietnam Civil Aviation, the airline was established as a state-owned enterprise in April 1989. Vietnam Airlines is headquartered in Long Biên District, Hanoi, with hubs at Noi Bai International Airport and Tan Son Nhat International Airport. The airline flies to 52 destinations in 17 countries, excluding codeshared services. From its inception until the early 1990s, Vietnam Airlines was a minor carrier within the aviation industry as it was hampered by a variety of factors including the socio-economic and political situation of the country. With the government's normalization of relations with the United States, the airline was able to expand, improve its products and services, and modernize its aging fleet. In 1996, the Vietnamese government brought together 20 service companies to form Vietnam Airlines Corporation, with the airline itself as the centerpiece. In 2010, the corporation was restructured into a limited liability company and renamed Vietnam Airlines Company Limited. A 7-seat management board, members of which are appointed by the Vietnamese Prime Minister, oversees the company. As passenger transport constitutes its core activity, Vietnam Airlines plays a crucial role in the economic development of the country. It owns 100% of Vietnam Air Service Company, a regional airline in southern Vietnam, 70% of the low-cost carrier Jetstar Pacific Airlines, and 49% of the Cambodian national airline Cambodia Angkor Air. In addition, the corporation earns revenue from airline catering and the maintenance and overhauling of aircraft through a number of its subsidiaries, including Vietnam Airlines Engineering Company and Vietnam Airlines Caterers. The company has also diversified its investments in the aircraft leasing and airport ground servicing industries, and is looking to manufacture aircraft components. It controls and operates a cargo division, Vietnam Airlines Cargo. Vietnam Airlines became a member of SkyTeam in June 2010, making it the first Southeast Asian carrier to have joined that alliance. It is expected to be restructured and partially privatized by 2015 to help it streamline its services and better compete with other airlines. This would facilitate its long-term development plan that involves the improvement of its products and services, and the expansion of its fleet and flight network, as the airline aspires to become the second largest full-service carrier in Southeast Asia by 2020. History. Beginnings. Vietnam Airlines has its origins in January 1956, when it was established by the North Vietnamese government under the name Vietnam Civil Aviation, following the nationalization of Gia Lam Airport. It was instituted after the government signed the Decree No. 666, TTG. The airline was created as part of the Air Force for civilian purposes with support from both the Soviet Union and China. Initially, its fleet consisted of 2 Lisanov Il-8OS that were later replaced by 2 Ilyushin Il-14 and 3 Aero A-45s. This was due to an embargo that prohibited the airline from leasing and/or buying American technology or components. The airline's development and expansion was seriously hampered by the Vietnam War. Following the war, its first international destination was Beijing, followed by Vientiane in 1976. During that year, the airline was known as General Department of Civil Aviation in Vietnam, and began full operations. It carried around 21,000 passengers, 1/3 of whom were on international flights, and 3,000 tons of cargo. In 1978, another important destination of Vietnam Airlines was added, with flights offered to Bangkok. The late 1980s and early 1990s saw the expansion of the network to Hong Kong, Kuala Lumpur, Manila and Singapore. In 1990, the company initiated discussions regarding the incorporation of Western-built aircraft into the fleet. Later that year, however, the carrier had to cancel the acquisition of two Airbus A310s due to the use of US-manufactured engines. By July 1991, the airline struck a wet lease agreement with Dutch lessor Transavia. The aircraft involved was a Boeing 737-300 that arrived in Vietnam Airlines livery. However, the aircraft was returned after the U.S. State Department pressured the Dutch lessor to remove the aircraft from Vietnam. Subsequently, Vietnam Airlines organized a similar but more complicated deal with T-Bal, who spent the rest of 1991 negotiating a deal with U.S. authorities. Eventually, a solution stating that must be positioned outside Vietnam, with no logo or lettering of Vietnam Airlines. On these conditions, it could operate on behalf of Vietnam Airlines was reached. In December 1991, Cathay Pacific and Vietnam Airlines agreed on a 50-50 joint venture to operate between Hong Kong and Vietnam. As the airline's uplift to 134 fleet did not meet Kai Tak Airport's noise restrictions. In October 1992, the Boeing 737 was supplemented with an Airbus A310. However, a dispute with Bulgarian Jet Air over who should pay for the repairs after the aircraft sustained an engine failure led to its replacement with another A310 from GATX, also operated by Jet Air. A similar dispute with United Technologies encouraged the airline to switch from Airbus to Boeing. Hence, a Boeing 767-200, leased from Ansett Worldwide Aviation Services, arrived in January 1993, and a Royal Brunei Airlines Boeing 767-300, arrived the following year. In October 1993, the first Airbus A320-200 was incorporated over a 2-year wet lease contract with Air France. Vietnam Airlines by now had started discussions with Air France about a partnership, and the French carrier agreed to lease its Airbuses to Vietnam Airlines, and also to provide customer support and pilot crew training. By the time the route network had further expanded internationally, seeing the incorporation of destinations such as Paris, Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei, Sydney, and Melbourne. In 1993, the airline carried 1.06 million passengers, 418,000 of whom were on international flights. New enterprise. The airline became the flag carrier of Vietnam in 1993, after having completed a restructuring program that was started 4 years earlier. In that year, the airline split from the Civil Aviation Administration of Vietnam and became a state enterprise. The move was similar to the reorganization of the Civil Aviation Administration of China into several regional airlines in 1987. Despite the fact that the airline gained some independence from the CAAV, it was still known as Civil Aviation Administration of Vietnam within the 1993 to 1996 period. In February 1994, U.S. President Bill Clinton lifted the trade embargo to allow Vietnam Airlines the ability to acquire Western-built aircraft. Consequently, Vietnam Airlines announced in April of the same year year that it would be phasing out its inefficient Soviet planes. By April 1995, the fleet consisted of 9 Airbus A320s, 11 Antonov and 24s, 4 ATR-72s, 2 Boeing 707-300s, 3 Ilyushin Il-18s, 9 Tupolev Tu-134s and 3 Yakovlev Yak-40s. At this time the route network comprised 14 domestic destinations and 16 international destinations. On the 27th of May 1995, the airline, along with a number of other aviation-related businesses, were incorporated to establish Vietnam Airlines Corporation. 2 Fokker 70s were purchased in mid-1995 for $50 million. They were aimed at partly replacing the two 134 feet on domestic routes as well as at serving as VIP transport. In December 1995, discussions with GECAS for the lease of 3 additional second-hand Boeing 767-300ers were underway. These ex-Continental Airlines aircraft would act as a replacement for wet-leased Boeing 767 aircraft in the fleet. In September 1996, Vietnam Airlines started offering business class services, and in 1999, the airline launched its frequent flyer program, Golden Lotus Plus. During 1996, Vietnam Airlines looked for aircraft which would substitute the A320s wet-leased from Air France when the deal was over. Apart from acquiring further A320s, the airline considered Boeing 737s and McDonnell Douglas MD-90s. In February 1996, GECAS delivered the first of 3 Boeing 767-300er to the carrier on dry lease for 5 years. In October the same year, 2 Boeing 767-300ers and a Boeing 767-200 on lease from AWAS and Royal Brunei Airlines respectively, were returned to the lessors, but in early 1997 another Boeing 767-300er was phased in on a 1-year lease from AWAS. With its freedom to operate Western-built aircraft, Vietnam Airlines considered the acquisition of long-haul aircraft to better service Vietnamese living overseas. The Airbus A340, Boeing 747 and the McDonnell Douglas MD-11 were topics of discussion. Meanwhile, 2 Fokker 70s were acquired in May and July to replace the 12 Tupolev Tu-134s. On the 3rd of September 1997, the crash of a Tupolev Tu-134B on approach to Phnom Penh's Pochentong Airport in bad weather resulted in more than 60 fatalities. A new livery was introduced in early 1998, initially unveiled on a Boeing 767. In December 2001, Vietnam Airlines signed a historic agreement with Boeing for the acquisition of its first-ever U.S.-built aircraft, signaling the start of trade under the bilateral trade agreement between the two countries. The deal involved 4 Boeing 777-200ers. The transaction was valued at $680 million. The first aircraft was initially scheduled for delivery in 2003. These 4 aircraft, along with 6 others of the same type that are leased from International Lease Finance Corporation, are the flagships of the airline, and serve on medium and long-haul routes, respectively. During that year, the airline carried 3.4 million passengers, 1.9 million of whom were on domestic flights. Flights to Beijing resumed and services to Kunming were launched. During 2002, Vietnam Airlines considered a lease offer from Airbus for 2 Airbus A340-300s. On the 4th of September 2003, a landmark ceremony celebrated the airline's receipt of its first Boeing 777-200er purchased outright from Boeing. On the 28th of October, the airline decided to move its operations in Moscow from Sheremetyevo International Airport to Domodedovo International Airport. In June 2005, Vietnam Airlines ordered 4 Boeing 787-8s. 12 additional 787-8s were ordered in late 2007, some of them to be directly acquired from the company, and the rest to be purchased by the carrier's subsidiary Vietnam Aircraft Leasing Company. These new aircraft were to allow Vietnam Airlines to expand its network and replace some leased aircraft. Regarding the delays from Boeing, CEO Pham Ngoc Minh remarked in September 2009, "We are not happy about the constant delays. It affects our business plan. We expected to get our planes in 2009, then 2010, and now nobody can confirm to us which is the exact delivery date. I can be patient, but it gives us a lot of headaches." Quote. In 2010, the airline switched its Boeing 787 order from the -8 to the -9 model, stating that 787-8s did not meet all the requirements Boeing initially promised. It is expected the airline will receive its first aircraft of the type in 2015. On the 20th of June 2005, the airline launched direct services to Frankfurt after having discontinued services to Berlin. It came after the 2004-2005 period when travel between the two countries soared 70%. The following year, Vietnam Airlines was admitted into IATA. As part of the move, Vietnam Airlines had to meet the association's IOSA safety standards. Expansion 2007 current. According to a number of newspaper reports in 2007, the Vietnamese government planned to partly privatize Vietnam Airlines. In the plan, the government considered selling 20 to 30% of the airline's stake to outsiders, with the government holding the balance. This was a small part of a bigger proposal by the government to privatize its state-owned companies, due to be completed by 2010. Vietnam authorized the plan the following year. However, the plan was not carried out as the airline missed its deadline scheduled by the government, which was arranged for 2010, due to the global financial crisis. On the 1st of October 2007, the airline and VALC signed a memorandum of understanding for the purchase of 10 Airbus A350XWBs, and 20 additional Airbus A321s. The Airbus A350s will supplement the Boeing 787s already ordered by the airline. This single order will result in Vietnam Airlines becoming one of the largest Airbus operators in Asia. The two companies also ordered 5 extra ATR-72-500s in December 2007. Vietnam was chosen as the host of Miss World's 60th contest in 2008. As the country's national airline, Vietnam Airlines was selected as the sponsoring airline for the beauty pageant. Therefore, it was tasked the job of managing all the transport matters for the contest, to be carried out during September and October, just before the beginning of the competition. However, it was later decided to carry out the event in Sanya, China, following speculations of Vietnam withdrawing. In August 2008, Vietnam Airlines added Nagoya, the airline's fourth point served in Japan besides Fukuoka, Osaka and Tokyo, to the route network. In 2009, Vietnam Airlines and the government of Cambodia established a joint venture, having 49% and 51% stock holding, respectively, with the goal of boosting tourism in Cambodia. The joint venture was a new Cambodian national airline named Cambodia Angkor, which started flying in July the same year, using ATR-72 equipment, and Airbus A321 joined the fleet in September. Also in 2009, the carrier signed a deal for another 16 Airbus A321s plus 2 Airbus A350s during the Paris Air Show. In addition, Vietnam Airlines launched a new bilingual website in October to simplify bookings and adopted a new passenger service system designed by IT provider Sabre Airlines Solutions. On the 26th of August 2010, the airline teamed up with Boeing during the unveiling of its interior modernization program to increase passenger comfort. From late September to early October, Vietnam Airlines discounted up to 85% of its 90,000 fares to celebrate Thang Long Hanoi's 1000th anniversary. In November 2010, the airline awarded Honeywell a $100 million contract to retrofit the Airbus A321's aircraft flight systems, which is calculated to save Vietnam Airlines $10,000 per aircraft per year. In February 2012, Vietnam Airlines boosted its stake in the low-cost carrier Jetstar Pacific Airlines to 70%, with Qantas holding the balance. The Vietnamese flag carrier was the major shareholder in Vietnam's second-largest airline, but its stake had been transferred to the Ministry of Finance, and subsequently to the Vietnamese State Capital Investment Corporation. The carrier's takeover of a CIC stake in Jetstar Pacific will capitalize the low-cost carrier with $27 million, an amount that will be directed towards fleet renewal. In late April 2012, the aircraft lessor ALC announced the placement of an order for 8 Boeing 787-9s, which will be leased to Vietnam Airlines. Deliveries are expected to start in 2017. In late May 2012, the carrier signed an agreement with Vietnam's Exim Bank for a loan worth $100 million, which the carrier will use to finance the acquisition of 4 Airbus A321s. A further $100 million was loaned in April 2013 to finance the purchase of 8 Boeing 787s. In a deal valued at $1.7 billion, Vietnam Airlines signed a contract with General Electric in October 2013 for 40 engines to power the Boeing 787 aircraft the airline has on order. In July 2014, a new route to Tokyo Hanoi from Hanoi was introduced. Vietnam Airlines received its first Airbus A350-900 in late June 2015, becoming the second operator of the type worldwide after Qatar Airways. In August 2015, the airline's first Boeing 787-9 entered the fleet. Future, as it is expected to be operating 170 aircraft in 2020. Vietnam Airlines is aiming to become the second-largest full-service carrier in Southeast Asia. The airline is interested in launching services to the United States, where more than 1.2 million Vietnamese reside. Such plans were confirmed in December 2003, but have since been postponed because Vietnam is not yet part of Federal Aviation Administration's International Aviation Safety Assessment program. Vietnam Airlines also considered opening new routes such as Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Vietnam, London, Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Shanghai, Beijing, China, Ho Chi Minh City, Mumbai, Ho Chi Minh City, Brisbane, and Ho Chi Minh City, Doha, according to CEO Pham Ngoc Minh in 2008. While the airline had launched flights to London, Gatwick, Beijing, and Shanghai, there are currently no flights to Mumbai, Doha, and Brisbane. The airline also plans to reopen flights to Berlin and commence flights to Adelaide, Perth, Amsterdam, Milan, Prague, Mandalay, Dali, and Nanjing, Hangzhou, and African cities by 2020. Vietnam Airlines is expected to serve 53 international destinations, up from 27 in 2011. By 2020, Vietnam Airlines plans to increase its annual revenue to $7 billion, up from $1.86 billion in 2010 by carrying 620,000 tons of cargo and 35 million passengers, using a fleet of 163 aircraft. It aims to capture a 45% market share of Vietnam's aviation market. During its first 15 years of operation, from 1996 to 2010, Vietnam Airlines carried a total of 82 million passengers on 678,550 flights. In addition, Vietnam Airlines plans to transfer most of its international operations from its current hub, Tan Son Nhat International Airport, to the proposed Long Than International Airport. With a cost of approximately $6 billion, the airport will, according to Vietnamese authorities, help Vietnam Airlines boost its operations internationally as it seeks to bypass Thailand as the dominant gateway to the Greater Mekong region. London operations were transferred from Gatwick to Heathrow in 2015. The airline plans to operate its new Boeing 787-9 aircraft to this destination, starting from July 2015. In January 2011, plans were announced by the airline to reinitiate an initial public offering by the end of 2012. An earlier attempt was stalled by the 2007 to 2010 financial crisis, scheduled for mid-2014. After several delays, the IPO and subsequent share offerings will supply the funds to expand Vietnam Airlines' fleet and network. With the company valued at $1.5 billion, the government plans to initially keep 75% of the shares. The IPO plan was submitted to the Vietnamese Ministry of Transport in June 2014, scheduled to commence on the 14th of November 2014. The IPO has already received 2 submissions from foreign companies, yet the names have not been disclosed. The corporation will be restructured by 2015 to bring it in line with other state-owned enterprises and to shift its focus away from non-core businesses. Following restructuring, the airline group will consist of Vietnam Airlines itself, as well as 3 carriers. In total, the corporation will comprise 26 independently audited companies. Corporate Affairs and Identity. Vietnam Airlines Company Limited is a limited liability company wholly owned by the government of Vietnam, having been restructured from Vietnam Airlines Corporation in June 2010. Its role is to provide economic gains to the country as its tasks, in addition to scheduled passenger and cargo transport, include responsibility towards labor, contribution to the state budget, and providing chartered flights. According to former CEO Dow Man Nung, the airline is headed and overseen by a 7-seat management team, members of which are selected by the Prime Minister of Vietnam. As of July 2015, Pham Viet Thanh was the chairman of the company, whereas Pham Ngoc Minh was the president and CEO. As of March 2014, the airline branch of the corporation had 10,929 employees. The airline is headquartered in the Long Biên district of Hanoi. Previously it was headquartered at Gia Lam Airport in Gia Lam, Hanoi. Training. In 2009, the airline, Airbus and ESMA Aviation Academy created Baviet Flight Training Company to train pilots in the country, with the expectation that up to 100 trainees would graduate annually. In October 2010, the company planned to train 60 pilots in Vietnam during 2011-2012. In 2010, Vietnam Airlines needed 636 pilots, 60% of whom were Vietnamese. It planned to raise that figure to 75% by 2015, meaning there will be at least 100 new recruits each year from 2010 until 2015. Vietnam Airlines also contracts Sky Global Academy Phoenix in Arizona, United States, to train its cadets. Financial performance: Vietnam Airlines has enjoyed an average of 37% increase in passengers flown per year until 1997, when the Asian financial crisis and other contributing causes led to a loss in profits for the airline. Nevertheless, the airline remained profitable throughout the crisis. In 1996, the airline carried 2.5 million passengers, up 18% from 1995. The airline carried more than 4 million passengers in 2002, which is an 18% increase over the previous year. Its cargo traffic also climbed 20% during the same period, resulting in a 2002 profit of $35.77 million. Despite the severe acute respiratory syndrome outbreak, the airline posted a $26.2 million profit for 2003. In 2006, it carried 6.8 million passengers and earned revenue of nearly $1.37 billion. Vietnam Airlines carried more than 9 million passengers, of which 4 million were international travelers in 2007, the year which saw the airline earning a gross profit of $23 million from a revenue of $1.23 billion. It also transported 115,100 tons of cargo. In 2009, the airline's revenue was $1.3 billion, compared to $1.56 billion it earned the previous year. During this period, Vietnam Airlines carried 9.3 million passengers. According to ANA Aero, Vietnam Airlines passenger capacity for 2010 rose 30% over the same period of the previous year. This also coincided with the increase in capacity at Vietnamese airports, at 21%. In 2012, the company's total revenue totaled $2.4 billion, with profits totaling $3.3 million. The following year, the carrier posted a $25 million gross profit. Vietnam Airlines held about 40% of the market share of international passengers flying to and from Vietnam in February 2012. At the time, Vietnam Airlines controlled 77% share of the domestic aviation market, with 14% covered by Jetstar Pacific. As of December 2012, Vietnam Airlines controlled just below 70% of the domestic market share. Subsidiaries and affiliates: Vietnam Airlines has at least 20 subsidiaries and affiliates. By the end of its restructuring in 2015, the company will have offloaded its stakes in more than 10 enterprises. Aircraft maintenance and production. Vietnam Airlines is increasingly becoming involved in the maintenance, overhauling, and production of aircraft. Maintenance works are carried out by Vietnam Airlines Engineering Company, that was established on the 1st of January 2009. VAECO was organized mainly upon the amalgamation of the A-75 and A-76 aircraft maintenance bases. VAECO carries out maintenance and technical services for Vietnam Airlines as well as for other airlines. The establishment of this company opens a new era to the aircraft maintenance field in Vietnam. As of 2013, VAECO was capable of performing a wide range of maintenance on many different aircraft types. This includes C-checks for the Boeing 777, Airbus A330, Airbus A320 and Airbus A321, and D checks the most thorough of all maintenance procedures, which are carried out on the ATR-72 and Fokker 70. In addition to its self-maintenance facilities, Vietnam Airlines also has maintenance contracts with other airlines and maintenance organizations. There are currently no production facilities in Vietnam for aircraft and spare parts. However, Boeing has managed to obtain 35% of the distribution market in Vietnam, and GE Aviation, in turn, supplies jet engines for the Boeing aircraft. For the future, conversely, Vietnam Airlines is planning to build a maintenance factory in conjunction with Rolls-Royce and other companies. It has also signed a memorandum of understanding with the ADS, a pan-European aerospace and defense corporation, that would let the corporation assemble and manufacture plane components in the future.